Conduct against female workers and its abuses of the federal H-2A program, Ostrom will pay $3.4 million. And the current owner of the Sunnyside facility, Windmill Farms, is required to implement a series of reforms to ensure that this conduct never happens again. We will use all of the money, the $3.4 million, that's being recovered to pay farm workers affected by Ostrom's illegal conduct. We estimate that that's about 170 farm workers. Some of them are here with us today, of course, and you'll be hearing from a few of them in a few moments. Every Washingtonian deserves to be free from discrimination. And I want to thank the workers who spoke out and helped us bring this case. Without the workers speaking out, there is no case. And it takes a great deal of courage in a situation that they were facing to speak out and to come to our office and to work with my team to make this case possible. And so really it's their stories that enable my legal team to do the legal work that brings us to such a successful outcome. So today I'm joined by, as I mentioned, a group of Ostrom workers impacted directly by this conduct. Also United Farm Workers, who played a key role in bringing this conduct to light. UFW organizers, along with, importantly, legal advocacy nonprofits Columbia Legal Services and the Northwest Justice Project. They reported Ostrom's unlawful conduct to my team initially, and that's what helped kickstart this case. We appreciate the partnership with all those individuals and organizations. I'm also joined today by members of my Civil Rights Division who worked hard on this case over the past year. Our Civil Rights Division Chief, Colleen Melody, Managing Assistant Attorney General Marcia Chen, Assistant Attorney General Alfredo Gonzalez Benitez, Assistant Attorney General Emily Nelson, Assistant Attorney General Terry Healy. I'll just pause on Terry for a moment. If there are sort of detailed questions about the case or the outcome, I may defer to Terry to answer some of those questions. So if you hear an attorney from our office speaking, that is likely Terry. Investigator Supervisor Alma Paletti and Legal Assistant Anna Alfonso. The team, the Civil Rights team is, they do really incredible work on behalf of the people of the state of Washington. I'm very proud of their efforts in this case. In creating the Civil Rights Division, I might have mentioned this last year when we were all here, I can't remember, I feel like I did, where I wasn't sure when creating the Civil Rights Division, Colleen, I guess it's been 8 or 9 years, I'm losing track of the years, but 9 years, okay, 9 years. I'm not sure if I had a absolutely clear idea of what kinds of cases in the end that we would be bringing. We'd never done that kind of work before in the office, but to the extent I had an idea of the kind of work that I hoped that a division could someday do, I think this case really epitomizes that and symbolizes that. Standing up for a group of Washingtonians who are facing, really serious illegal actions by a large company and are in a difficult situation trying to enforce their rights. And that's why we have a law firm on behalf of the people who can advocate for all the people and make sure their rights are protected. So what I'll do is briefly talk about the case and the outcome, go over the details of the resolution, and then we'll turn it over to, I believe we have 3 speakers. Phoebe, who's here next to me, will translate for those 3 speakers, okay? And the order, I believe, of the 3 speakers, first, Roman Castillo will go first, followed by Ovida Bustamante, followed by Isela Cabrera. Those will be the 3 workers that you'll be hearing from. Again, Phoebe will be doing the translating, which we really appreciate you doing that for us. And then, of course, we'll open up to any questions that you all have. So I filed this lawsuit in Yakima County Superior Court in August of 2022 after our investigation revealed calculated systemic discrimination by Ostrom. Before April 2021, Ostrom's Sunnyside facility employed an average of 117 workers from the local community. 87% of those workers were women. In the space of 1 year, Ostrom had hired 65 H-2A guest workers to replace them, and 97% of those replacement workers were male. Ostrom managers decided to replace its primarily female workforce because the managers believed female farm workers had childcare obligations or could not work late hours or on weekends. Ostrom decided to abuse the H-2A program to get the workers it desired, primarily male guest workers who would work whatever hours the company wanted. But the guest worker program is only available to an employer who has a shortage of domestic employees available to work. So Ostrom had to figure out a way to get rid of its existing, largely female workforce. What Ostrom did was invent reasons to discipline, terminate, and refuse employment to domestic workers. It even placed job advertisements that misrepresented work requirements and wages. Ostrom posted a job listing on a local Facebook group seeking, quote, only males to work at a mushroom warehouse in Sunnyside. Ostrom also told Washington-based job applicants that they did not have enough agricultural experience, even though many of the guest workers Ostrom later hired had no agricultural experience at all. This conduct, needless to say, violates both the Washington State Law Against Discrimination and the Washington State Consumer Protection Act. When workers complained, and workers tried to stand up for their rights about this unlawful treatment, Ostrom retaliated against the employees. For example, one harvesting room manager physically assaulted a female worker with a metal cart immediately after she met with Ostrom's management and expressed her concerns about workplace conditions. In other cases, Ostrom's supervisors fabricated violations of company rules in order to punish workers who spoke out. Retaliating against employees for speaking up against discrimination violates our state law against discrimination. Shortly after we filed our case, Ostrom sold its Sunnyside mushroom plant to Windmill Farms. Windmill Farms is a company from Canada. As a result of this resolution, Ostrom will pay $3.4 million, which we will use to compensate the affected farm workers. So to be clear, every dime of that $3.4 million will be used to compensate the workers. In addition, as a result of our case, Windmill Farms is prohibited from a whole series of conduct. So the agreement, just to be clear, paid for by Ostrom Farms, they're paying the $3.4 million. Windmill is taking over, and they have agreed to, have signed a document that's legally enforceable that requires certain conduct. So for some examples, they are prohibited, Windmill Farms, from misrepresenting to current and prospective employees the terms and conditions of employment, applying more stringent requirements to domestic employees than to workers hired through the H-2A program, failing to hire, discriminating against, or terminating employees on the basis of sex, citizenship, immigration status, or other protected categories under Washington State's law against discrimination, or retaliating against employees who make claims about discrimination. Should Ostrom resume operations anywhere in Washington State, the policies from this court order would apply to it as well. So what I'm going to do now is turn to the three workers who I mentioned before. Again, Phoebe will be translating the comments from those workers. And just before we turn to those workers, again, I just want to express my thanks to the three of them, but to all the workers who are here today, and of course, all the workers at Ostrom who, had to endure this conduct, number one, and number two, had the courage to speak out to Ostrom, and then had the courage to work with my team so we could bring this case, which would not have happened, I can assure you, if they had not taken all those steps. So with that, I believe Roman will go first. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Buenos días, mi nombre es Román Castillo Ávila
Good morning, my name is Roman Castillo Avila.
y quiero darles las gracias a Fiscal General y a su equipo de trabajo
I want to give thanks to the Attorney General and his team
en nombre de todos mis compañeros trabajadores de Ostrom Farm
And
y
in-
ex trabajadores.
and in the name of all of my coworkers of Ostrom Farm and ex-coworkers.
Queremos darles las gracias al fiscal y a su equipo por el gran apoyo que hemos recibido de ellos.
We want to thank the Attorney General and his team for all of their support.
Gracias a ellos hemos logrado un paso adelante
Thanks to them, we have been able to move one step forward
a hacernos escuchar para que se termine la discriminación en la compañía de Ostrom Farm.
and we were heard to be able to stop the discrimination with Ostrom Farms.
La discriminación y hostigamiento laboral.
The discrimination and the overworked labor.
Estamos muy agradecidos con el fiscal y su equipo de trabajo.
We are very grateful to the Attorney General and his team.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Mi nombre es Jovita Bustamante.
My name is Jovita Bustamante.
Soy una ex trabajadora de Armstrongs.
I am an ex-worker from Ostrom.
Yo tenía 2 años y medio trabajando en la compañía.
I was working for the company for 2 years and a half.
De repente ellos decidieron que no querían mujeres trabajando ahí
And all of a sudden, they decided that they did not want women working there.
y tomaron la decisión de despedirnos
And they made the decision to let go of us,
a nosotras las mujeres.
for all of the women.
Yo fui una de las que despidieron
I was one of the women that was let go.
cuando llegaron los de H2A.
When the H2A workers were there,
Y eso me afectó mucho emocionalmente.
and that affected me emotionally.
Duré días llorando, triste, pensando cómo me dejaron sin mi trabajo.
I was crying and very sad for days, just thinking about how they left me without a job
De un día para otro.
from one day to the other.
Quiero dar las gracias en nombre de todas las mujeres que fuimos discriminadas.
And I want to give thanks in the name of all of the women that were discriminated.
Y gracias al procurador y a su equipo.
Thank you to the Attorney General and his team.
Y la lucha no para. Seguimos adelante hasta conseguir un contrato de unión.
And the fight does not stop here. We will continue until we sign a contract with the union.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Hola, soy Isela Cabrera,
Hi, I am Isela Cabrera,
una ex trabajadora de Ostrom y actualmente de Windmill Park.
an ex-worker from Ostrom and a current worker with Windmill Farms.
Estamos agradecidos con el Procurador de Justicia y todo su equipo
We are very thankful for the Attorney General and all of his team
por el acuerdo que llegó con Ostrom
for the agreement that they came to with Ostrom
de 3.4 millones
of 3.4 million
de dólares para todos nuestros compañeros que fueron reprendidos
for all of our coworkers that were fired
y descansados.
and let go.
Porque nosotros somos unos trabajadores esenciales.
Because we are essential workers,
Exhorto a mis compañeros que actualmente trabajamos en Windmill Park
and I encourage my coworkers that are currently working at Windmill Farms
que pierdan ese miedo,
to lose the fear,
que se sepan defender, que nos sepamos defender como trabajadores
to know how to defend ourselves as workers
a nuestros derechos
and know our rights,
y a seguir defendiéndonos como trabajadores esenciales.
and to continue to defend ourselves as essential workers.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thanks to all three of you for speaking, and for all your help with this case. You mentioned, losing the fear, and really that's easier said than done, I suspect, right? And so, but because these folks who are here and so many others lost that fear and were willing to come forward, we just can't emphasize enough how that made this case possible. I think it's hard to maybe express what's the most striking thing about this case or the most outrageous thing about this case. But it's clear that Ostrom engaged in systemic, blatant discrimination, calculated to force out female employees so they could replace them with guest workers who they believed, importantly, they believed they could better control and require them to work longer hours with fewer rights. When workers fought back, they were punished for that by Ostrom. So the way we try to do our work in the AG's office and the way the civil rights team does their work is to treat cases like this as if it was our own mother or father or son or daughter who's impacted. And I really encourage all Washingtonians to think about cases like this exactly that way. These workers are doing, as been said, critical work for our state and for our economy, and they deserve the basic dignity that should match the dignity of the work that they are most certainly performing. One more thing I do want to add before taking the questions, we are wanting to make sure we are in contact with all approximately 170 workers who are impacted by this conduct. So we have some contact information on them, but of course we want to hear from all of them. And so if you believe you should be a part of this process, we encourage folks to call 1-833-660-4877 and select option 5. So that's 1-833-660-4877 and select option 5. There's also an email option, which is simply the word Ostrom, O-S-T-R-O-M, Ostrom @atg.law.gov. That's our website, Ostrom @atg.law.gov. So with that, we will take any questions that folks have, and again, my team may be helping me in answering those questions, and thank you so much for being here.
Mr. Attorney General,
Yeah.
besides a monetary penalty or settlement, has Ostrom's acknowledged any wrongdoing in the settlement?
Yeah, that they did not, and that's typical in these cases, right? Or just being blunt, it's obvious what they did. They're not paying $3.5 million, okay, to the state of Washington to compensate these 170 individuals unless they did something wrong, right? So one thing that's important to us is bringing this case is daylighting all these practices. That's out there for the public to see and draw their own conclusions, but let's not kid ourselves. What they did was wrong. They know it. They're paying a significant amount of money to these workers as a result of that. And the outcome from our standpoint, I think what you heard expressed is one that we think is very, very positive.
Do you think this was isolated to Ostrom, or do you think this could be a problem with other companies in the state, and this may be a wake-up call for them?
I should repeat the question for those who are on the line. My apologies for not doing that. The first question, by the way, just was whether the company was required to issue an apology as a result of this agreement. And so the question that was just asked, I'll try and paraphrase it, is do we think there's maybe similar conduct going on with other companies? Will this resolution maybe be a wake-up call for those companies along those lines? Well, before coming to the press conference, I was meeting with some members of my team to talk about other potential cases related to farm workers, agriculture workers around the state. So this is not our first case. We've had others as well, as you probably know, that have reached resolutions. We don't talk about our investigations, of course, as I think you know that is our policy. But I think what I would summarize is this is not our first case related to those workers, and it won't be our last. Of that I'm sure. Beyond that, in terms of whether it serves as a wake-up call, I think was the phrase you used, or a message to companies when it comes to this important workforce in our state, I guess what I would say is it better be, right? I mean, I don't know what to tell them, right? It's we've got rules, they're not complicated, right? We have rules, they're not complicated. And I do think that it's certainly my hope that they're paying attention to this outcome. I think maybe just as important as the outcome, I think, would be that I hope that they see that workers are standing up for their rights and expressing that in a very public way and are demanding the same treatment that you or I would expect at our job. And so I think it goes beyond, hey, a legal team saying something, right, and that legal message should be delivered. Look, they know what the rules are. I guess I hope that just as much, if not more, that what they're hearing is workers saying they're not going to put up with that, and they're going to speak out. And when that happens, a legal process begins and results in outcomes like this.
Just to clarify, no admission of wrongdoing, but Ostrom did agree to pay the
Oh, yeah.
$3.4 million. Okay.
They're paying the 3.4. I think we need to have that check by May 30th. Is that right? By May 30th. So we'll have the check May 30th. Then we'll start the process of getting all that $3.4 million to those workers. So that is correct, and then Windmill, who's acquired Ostrom, has to agree to all these terms as they've now taken over the operations. Essentially, these terms which are detailed and enforceable in a court, like that's when they've got to sign and that we can enforce in a court if that doesn't happen.
So in a situation like this, I mean, some of the pieces were obvious, like the Facebook ad where it says only males. But in other pieces where it's possibly the worker's word versus the company's word, how do you prove it?
Well, I guess what I would say is, we were certainly prepared to take this case to trial and have the testimony of those workers presented. And it was our belief that our case was very strong. A combination of, to your point, combination of things that were just blatant out there for all the world to see, combined with worker after worker who'd experienced illegal conduct by the company. And so I don't think the company's paying $3.5 million to say we're very concerned about what that would look like in court. So, you know, every case has its risk. That's obvious, whatever kind of case you're talking about. And so, but we were certainly prepared to take this case to trial. That said, we are glad they've resolved it. That enables us to get these dollars right away and get it to the workers who are impacted. You've heard about the impact on their lives, losing a job, right? I mean, it doesn't get much more fundamental than that. And hopefully this will help those individuals.
And I don't know if anybody here can answer that, but has Windmill been actively trying to bring some of these people? I mean, I know at least one is working it out for Windmill, but are they trying to bring the folks that are affected back onto the jobs, get them their jobs back, essentially?
So we can follow beyond that. I think we're happy to follow. I just want to make sure we give you a correct answer on that. We're happy to follow. Yeah. Is there anybody on the line who has a question? And if so, if you don't mind just kind of saying who you are, if you've got a question before you ask it.
I have a question. This is Andrea Cooper, SDR in Washington, D.C.
Go right ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, thanks for holding this press conference. I was just wondering if in the course of the investigation you determined how Ostrom was able to demonstrate, prove the need for H-2A workers if they had local workers already doing those jobs.
So thanks for that question. Terry, are you able to answer that?
Yeah,
go right ahead. Go ahead and step right up so they can, yeah.
Sure. During the investigation, what we uncovered was a systematic terminating of employees starting in April 2022. And because they were terminating staff, they then used farm labor contractors to make up the difference in employees, but on Ostrom's books itself, it looked like they had a deficit of the number of workers at the facility.
Thank you for that question. Anybody? Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering as a follow-up, if part of the conclusion is that there needs to be more stringent review of the applications for H-2A seasonal workers.
I guess this is Bob again now. I guess what we'd say to that is, I mean, I think that's up to the federal government, right, to with their program, how they want to handle that. What we can do, the authority we have, is enforcing state laws and illegal conduct under the State Consumer Protection Act and our law against discrimination. Obviously, that's what this case is about, the tools that we have and the laws that I can enforce and my team can enforce. So as it relates to, I don't say larger issues, not the right word, but related issues with the H-2A program, I don't think we're the ones that are in the best position to answer that question, which I think is an important one. But I don't think that's one that we're in a position to enforce and might be better directed with federal agencies. Thanks for that question.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yep. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Jasper? Hello?
Yes, go right ahead.
Oh, sorry, Jasper Sundin from the Yakima Herald, sort of piggybacking off that question. Are you aware of any investigation on the offense level when it comes to the H-2A program and how it was used by Oscar or any other investigations from other agencies?
Right. So I guess I'll let, our understanding is that where there are some investigations but not related to H-2A, is that correct?
Not as far as we know.
Not as far, and I want to emphasize, I should underline that, not as far as we know. So we would not necessarily be aware of that, to be clear. But not as far as we know, I think is perhaps where I should have started with that answer. Not as far as we know. Any other questions from those on the phone?
And then,
Go ahead. Mhm.
You may have covered this earlier, I'm sorry, my audio has been a little spotty. 2.4 million being paid out to workers, will that be paid out to workers regardless of immigration status? Are there any other requirements for workers other than that they work at Ostrom for a specific period of time?
It'll be paid to all workers regardless of immigration status, as consistent with Washington state law. And yes, there is a time period, about a year and a half, of where the conduct was going on. So it's for workers during that time period. We believe that's about 170 or so workers who were impacted during that time. And so we do want to hear from those workers. We're in the process of, we're of course in contact with many of them already, but encourage them to reach out and to contact our office. Any other questions from those online? If not, we appreciate all of you who joined us on the phone, and all of you who've joined us here today in person. We really appreciate it. I think just to wrap up, first, thank you, to all the workers, muchas gracias. I think my team would say almost any case they bring, they can't bring unless people speak up, right? But I suspect that is especially true in a case like this, right? That is especially true in a case like this. And I think maybe it's fair to say that it's especially challenging for workers in this particular environment to speak up. And that's why we're so grateful, in addition to taking time to drive all the way over from the other side of the mountains to join us here today and to share their thoughts and their experience and really their solidarity with this effort, which is a team effort for sure. And moving forward, our civil rights team looks forward to enforcing more cases like this, consistent with the question that was asked earlier. And so we encourage anyone in the state of Washington who works in this industry, who's experiencing discrimination in their view, to contact our office. And they know that there's a team here who will be very focused on the concerns that they're expressing. Thank you all so much. It's an honor to be here, and it was an honor really to take this case and work with all of you. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sí se puede.
Sí se puede.